Hello, this is Paul Johnson with the Optimistic American. We have a marvelous guest today, Andrew Yang. Now, Andrew Yang has had an illustrious history. He was the child of Taiwanese immigrants. He went to Brown undergraduate and to Columbia Law School. He became an entrepreneur as well as a lawyer and was able to make significant gains in the technology industry. But many people know him because he became the guy who ran for president as an Asian American. One of his favorite slogans was not left, not right, forward, which just simply meant that he believed that this country needed to move away from the old labels of left and right. Now, what he's doing today is he's involved in political reform at a national level. He has what he calls the Forward Party, but it's really more of a political action committee that's designed to try to ensure that we bring independents and people who aren't registered as part of the parties back into the process, that we treat them fairly and equitably, and that we create elections that give everyone a chance to be able to win. Those reforms are starting to happen around the country, and Andrew Yang is playing a big role in them. You're going to like this guest. He's fun, he's enjoyable, he's a friend of mine. And again, I appreciate you being here with us on The Optimistic American. And now on with Andrew Yang. Andrew, welcome to The Optimistic American. We're so proud to have you on today.
It's great to be here, Paul. Congratulations on the awesome work you do. And love the call for more optimism. Americans kind of could use some.
Yeah, well, that was kind of something that we saw a lot of in your campaign. It was amazing how you came from almost nowhere, and then all of a sudden you were really a contender in the race. But here's my first question for you, because to me this is the most interesting. You spent time in that presidential race. You clearly, I think, had a future in the Democratic Party. If you wanted to run again, you could have. But instead, you left the party, became an independent, and now you're totally focused on trying to bring reform around the country with the Forward Party. Talk to me, if you would, about the Forward Party itself and why it is that you put so much of an emphasis on reform as opposed to simply sticking with the Democratic Party and running again in another primary.
Well, thanks, Paul. I feel like you and I might have had some similar experiences where you were an elected official and did a lot of work, and then you've come to the fact that reform is needed around things like nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting. I had a similar epiphany where I came off the trail in 2020 and still felt terrible about the direction of American politics. And I sat down to figure out why. And I realized it was because we're being set up. This two-party system is pitting us against each other. It's not designed for good policy. And I appreciate your saying that I had a future if I just did my thing as a Democrat, but I'm not driven by achieving a particular office or having a role. I want to fix the country. I want to leave it in good shape for my kids and for yours, for everyone's kids. And so if you're going to be honest, by the way, I think this is one of the problems that if you take 100 reasonable people, 99 of them will just kind of go along within this system, even though some of them sense that there's something amiss, And so I suppose I'm in this other category where the system itself took precedence over any personal advancement or position I could try and attain myself.
So what's the goal of the Forward Party? What are you hoping to do with that?
The Forward Party's purpose is to fix American politics, and it needs it. I think people can sense that. I'm going to guess. Actually, let me ask you, Paul, how many of your listeners are based in Arizona?
Oh, they're all over the country. We have listeners from one end of this country to the other.
All right. So I'll think about it nationally. The numbers I like to throw at people are that Congress has a 22% approval rating, but incumbents have a 94% reelection chance. And so you think to yourself, wait a minute, those numbers are so different. And it's because 90% of the congressional districts are drawn to be uncompetitive in the general. So people are getting more and more frustrated that they say, oh, like, why does the system not seem to represent me? And the system doesn't represent you because legislators are trying to please and placate the most extreme 10 to 12% of voters who vote in party primaries. So if you're not in that wing, and I'm going to guess most people listening to this are not, then you feel like you're on the outside looking in. So the Forward Party's goal is to change that, to get rid of party primaries, to replace them with nonpartisan primaries and ranked choice voting, and provide a positive alternative that people can see themselves in. Now, that's a lot. In a place like Arizona, it could take the form of supporting a ballot initiative. There are 25 states that have that in their states where you can change things if enough people get together. In the other states, it requires a bill to pass through the state house. That's hard, maybe harder than the ballot initiative. The Forward Party's goal is to make this happen in as many states as possible and give us all a positive alternative that does not involve beating up on 50% of your neighbors. Instead, it's about delivering policies and reconnecting our leaders to the American people.
Yeah, I love that about your campaign. You didn't spend very much time, if any, beating up on the other party or Donald Trump. I love the not left, not right, forward, and I assume that's kind of where the party name came from.
Yeah, that was one of the taglines on the presidential. And then when you started thinking, what would you name a new political party? Forward was very natural. I joke, Paul, that backward party was taken, and you can kind of pick which one, what I'm talking about there.
Yeah, it's a I don't know about you, but I was a registered Democrat. I changed my party registration a couple of decades ago to being an independent, and one of the things that I saw after doing that was, as a Democrat, I was very defensive about the Democratic Party. I was defensive about who we were. But once you start to back away from it, you start to recognize there are excesses on both sides, and that those excesses oftentimes get in the way of us being able to create good policy, because it's more of a team sport as opposed to trying to figure out what's right for America.
100%. And I made not that much of it when I registered as an independent. It ended up generating a ton of headlines and frankly, a bunch of attacks that I found mystifying, where I thought to myself, okay, I was a Democrat for a long time and I was trying to do good things for people. I now realize that doing good things for people involves changing the political system. So I'm changing my registration to an independent. And then people acted like I was so, I don't know, sinister or corrupt as a result. I certainly got accused of being a Republican and a conservative over and over again. And, not that there's anything necessarily wrong with being called those things, but it really just made you think, wow, in your world, there's really just blue versus red. This team versus that team. And if I take off your jersey, then I'm all of a sudden a bad guy. But I got a call from someone, frankly, someone very famous, but I'm not going to name names. But he called me that week and he said, Andrew, I just want to thank you because I haven't seen an act of human courage like that in quite some time. And it gave me hope. And getting a call like that really made you reflect. It's like, wow. Unfortunately, there's something courageous about taking a jersey off. And it really should not be that. I mean, I'm still the same person. I was asked what my politics are at an event the other day, and I said, my politics are trying to do good things for people. And the question is, how can you do good things for people? In this political system, in my opinion, most of the big problems are going to be left unsolved. And so the first problem becomes the system itself. I'm friends with a former climate change activist who has become a democracy reform activist because she concluded that we're never going to deliver on climate change unless you have a functional political system. You could insert a lot of things in that bucket. I would put something like education in there. I would put immigration in there. There are a lot of issues that we're not going to solve for unless the political system itself evolves.
Yeah, it's what happens is it becomes a blame game, and clearly you can see it in climate reform, vaccinations. You can see it in education. There's once it gets engaged in politics, people pick up the the red team or the blue team. And then all of a sudden, no matter what it is, whatever the blue team supports, the red team hates. Whatever the red team supports, the blue team hates. And you can't even have a logical conversation with either side because it's really not about the issue. It's not about vaccines. It's not about education. It's not about what's going on with climate reform. It's about who's going to win that game, who's going to be the one that comes out successful.
It's about scoring points and sticking it to the other team. I was in Texas last week. By the way, Forward Party Texas, shout out to you. That was a lot of fun. But there was someone who joked with me in Austin, said that if Republicans came out with an anti-Sasquatch bill, then Democrats would start accusing them of being anti-Sasquatch and defending the Sasquatch. And no one would be like, hey, guess what? There is no Sasquatch. Where there's just such a reflexive, I have to do the opposite of whatever you're doing.
All right, let's dig into the part of the reason why the existing system's a problem. So you had made mention of how the system works today. I think a couple of facts are important. The first one is 85% of all congressional elections and 85% of all legislative seats throughout the country are in safe districts. That means once they get done winning the primary, there is no general election. And part of what that's done to candidates, I recall when I was mayor, when I ran for city council and mayor, I would get a voting list and I'd go knock on people's doors. Well, because it was a nonpartisan race, I would knock on independents' doors, Republican doors, Democratic doors, and you'd learn from all of them. You'd have to listen to them. You'd have to hear the things that they weren't happy about. But when you run for the legislature, when you run for Congress, you don't get people in the other party. There's no reason to go talk to them. For most of those seats, 85% of them, once you win the primary, the race is over. So there's no experience at even being able to listen to people on the other side, much less the fact that the existing system greatly incentivizes appealing to the extreme.
Yeah, but believe it or not, I think that number went up to 90%.
Wow.
because both parties said, you know what? This is still too competitive for us. Let's try and find some more districts we can redraw. And that's why people, again, feel like our politics are getting dragged to the extremes. Social media makes it worse for sure. But the political incentives are the most pernicious. And I want to draw this out a little bit. There were 10 Republican members of Congress who voted to impeach Trump after January 6th. 8 of them didn't make it back through their primaries. And the 2 that made it back were in Washington State, where they had a top 2 primaries. So it was something of a more forgiving system. Among the 8 that didn't make it back, Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, Peter Meyer. And this is in a system where 94% of incumbents win re-election. So about the only way you can lose your seat in these safe districts is to piss off the base. So you have legislators who are running scared from their bases. Now, the opposite of this happened in Alaska, where they got rid of party primaries and Lisa Murkowski got to run for re-election. And she managed to fend off a Trump-endorsed challenger whom she would have lost to in a Republican primary. Republican primary voters in Alaska were very angry at Lisa Murkowski for voting to impeach Trump. She was the only Republican senator who did so, who was up for re-election. But because there was no party primary, she could appeal directly to the entire state. And then she managed to get back in by maybe 4 or 5 points. So it wasn't a slam dunk, but the general voter could have their say. So you have a system that is disproportionately empowering the folks on the extremes and the wings, and then leaving most of us wondering what the heck happened to our politics.
Yeah, I had on our show the speaker in Alaska, who was actually opposed to the change that was taking place. She lost right before that election, and then she came back in and won. She actually told us, she said, look, I was wrong. She said, this has been one of the best things that's ever happened to our state. And she even thinks it's better for the Republican Party. She said, look, we still win most of the elections overwhelmingly. She said, but what it does is it forces us to appeal to the center. It forces us to appeal to Democrats and to other people. And she said, and as we spread that message out, we actually gain more power because more people are willing to take part in what it is that we're doing. She was extremely positive about the results that they're seeing in Alaska and the ability to reach bipartisan consensus.
Yeah, one of the guys who emerged in the Republican Party because of ranked choice voting being used is Glenn Youngkin in Virginia. He got nominated via ranked choice voting against some relatively extreme candidates over there, and then he won the general against a relatively strong Democrat in Terry McAuliffe. So for Republicans, it gets you more appealing candidates who are more electable. And if that's what people want, frankly, I mean, it's just a better process. So if a majority of people want that, just like a majority of people wanted Lisa Murkowski to come back. And the key word there is people, not majority of Republicans or majority of Democrats. It's just majority of voters. So if you think that voters should have their voice heard, then this process improves things a lot.
Yeah, I think the existing system, which we've just talked about, the gerrymandered districts and other things, it pulls out the worst in both parties. It pulls out this kind of mano a mano, a constant fight. Whatever you say, I must be against. But I think with the system that you've been proposing, which is getting rid of the partisan primaries and then having some type of runoff, either an instant runoff with ranked choice voting, but a system that ensures that you have real competition. What it really does, it pulls out the best in Republicans and Democrats. You know, Democrats, I think, do a good job of focusing on programs that are important to people, education and programs that like parks and recreation. Republicans tend to do a good job, or they have in the past, a good job on the economy as well as the human spirit. Well, you can get the best of both of those as opposed to the worst of both of those. You can find a center ground on those issues.
Yeah, and that's what we're trying to change with the Forward Party. So first, we ourselves are something of a gathering ground for folks who want common sense solutions and good policy. And second, we're advocating for structural reforms to make that the norm in places like Arizona around the country. But it's not going to happen unless we roll up our sleeves and build it. Because if you just let the political incentives continue, you're going to see that folks who you consider moderate or bipartisan or centrist are an endangered species in Washington, D.C. And I'm a numbers guy, but there are tables to this effect that you can pull up yourself. And there are organizations in D.C. that are throwing their hands up and saying, hey, every time there's an election, our numbers shrink. So what do people think is a more practical approach? Hoping that trends reverse themselves, even though all of the forces are getting stronger. And by the way, there are compounding dynamics here. So you have these political incentives that Paul and I are describing. Then you have media organizations separating us into ideological teams and tribes. And then you have social media pouring gasoline on the whole thing. And so if you look at it, which of these is going to reverse itself? Which of them is going to get stronger? That's why our best option is to change the base political incentives, because believe it or not, and that sounds very, very hard to a lot of people, it's actually the easiest of these three, probably. You know, the others involve, I'm a numbers guy again. I mean, if you were to get behind various ballot initiatives, like the one that could be on tap in Arizona, the one that just won in Nevada, you're looking at a cost of approximately $20 million per state. That sounds like a lot until you realize that we're going to spend $8 billion beating each other up in 2024. So if you have that kind of context, you think, well, is it worth $200 million to try and liberate 6, 8, 10 U.S. senators from party primaries? That's a steal. This Alaska change we're talking about that not only got Lisa Murkowski back into the U.S. Senate instead of Kelly Tshibaka, it also had Mary Peltola defeat Sarah Palin. And I joke that imagine if Sarah Palin was back in Congress, we'd all be 2 IQ points dumber because they'd be sticking a TV camera in her face every day saying, Sarah, say something crazy, say something crazy. And then she would. And then they'd run to the Dems being like, what are you thinking about the crazy thing Sarah Palin said today? So having Sarah Palin not get back into Congress and Lisa Murkowski fend off the Trump endorsed challenger, that ballot initiative to do away with the party primaries in Alaska cost about $6 million. That was the greatest investment in in democracy today, in American history, maybe. I mean, that's a steal. So if you can spend 20 million a state for a 60% chance of liberating 2 US senators, it's a steal. And Forward Party is galvanizing resources. It can be grassroots volunteers. So if you just want to go to forwardparty.com and click on your state, we need your help. We need you. It can be money. People do donate to Forward Party, and we channel that money to these efforts. So we need to get this done, and we don't have unlimited time. It'll make people more optimistic. Imagine if all of your representatives actually sounded sane again. That would make us more optimistic.
Yeah, it's and I'm going to hit on that point in a second. The Forward Party, by the way, we really appreciate your efforts here in Arizona. As you know, I'm actively engaged in the Arizona effort. And again, the goal is to just simply pull the parties out of the primaries and then have some type of ranked choice voting at a level that's up above that. The people who are supporting it, which include business leaders, educational leaders, they're saying exactly what you're saying, which is, hey, this is a drop in the bucket from an investment standpoint, that they're spending significant money. And by the way, many of these business leaders are Republicans who are supporting us, who are saying, you know, they spend significant money trying to keep the extreme factions at bay in the Republican Party because they keep wanting to do things that can be so harmful to the business community. But effectively, this is a cheaper way for them to do it. Now, our opposition, it's not hard. Here's our real opposition. Incumbents. Incumbents hate, the number one incentive that they have is no competition. They don't want to have to go run for re-election. And when you have a gerrymandered district, you don't have an opponent then in the general election. And if you can just keep appealing to the base, you rarely have an opponent in the primary election. And if you can keep out competition, it's obvious why incumbents would want that. This creates competition. It creates real races. It gives voters real choices. And it takes those voters who are now the independents or the other voters, the people not registered in a party, and it gives them an equal playing field, which they don't have today.
Yeah, you saw it in what happened in Nevada. So this ballot initiative was up last November, and both the Democrats and Republicans came out against it because, like you said, Paul, they just don't like competition. I was in Nevada, and people were getting text messages from the Democratic Party saying, vote no on question 3 because it would be too confusing for voters. That was legitimately their argument, saying, hey, these party primaries are necessary because we don't want to confuse you having real choice. And 53% of Nevadans voted for it. The winning argument was a military veteran looking at the camera saying, I went overseas to defend the country for years. I came back. I can't vote in our primaries. And I don't think that's right. And the average Nevadan saw that and said, yeah, that guy should be able to vote. So it's common sense. About 2/3 of Americans want this, but approximately 0% of political parties want real competition. Mm-hmm. So both the Democratic Party and the Republican Party are reflexively against this kind of reform. It's why I formed the Forward Party, because I knew it would be a waste of time to go within the two-party system and ask parties to do this.
When you and I met, you made a great argument, which had a compelling effect on me. You made the point that you don't really even have to win in every state with this type of an effort to be successful, to begin to change the country. Could you maybe illuminate that for us?
Yeah, how many U.S. senators does it take to swing national politics now? And you could answer any number from 1 to 3, and you'd probably be correct. So imagine the Forward Party rises up and we get 5 to 10% of voters. That's enough to swing races around the country. It might be enough to swing a Senate race or two. By the way, very soon, a number of state legislators in a swing state are about to announce that they're forming the Forward Caucus, and it's a deadlocked state. So this group of state legislators might immediately be the fulcrum. That's the magic of working in a polarized environment, is if you win any seats in the middle, you can wind up swinging the whole thing. That's one reason why this work is so exciting. And if you're in Arizona, I'm sure Paul talks about this a lot, but the URL is voterchoicearizona.org. Mm-hmm. There are analogous efforts around the country. If you want to find out about them, you can just go to forwardparty.com and click on your state. But when I ask people, I say, how many people do you think need to join the Forward Party for us to change politics for the better, and they think about it. And then I tell them, look, it's a lot less than 51%. It's actually closer to 10%. If we get 10% of Americans on board out of the 50% or so who self-identify as independents, we win. And so, one of the fun things about being on podcasts like this is just trying to get closer to that 10%.
I think, Andrew, it's sometimes lost on people as to why you win. First, you've been very focused on a message. The problem with creating a political party, the question becomes, what's the platform? Who's our candidates? How are we going to select precinct committee work? Has all these questions that people ask. You've made yours very simple. This is about creating reforms around the country that allow everyone the chance to be able to vote. So if people take part in the Forward Party, they could still be a Democrat or a Republican. They can be an independent if they want to be. But they can take part in the Forward Party, list themselves as part of the Forward Party, and give it the moxie that says to elected officials when they say, well, what does it mean that they have 6,000 members of the Forward Party? Well, one, it can swing elections. And two, they're going to know what they want. What they want is to reform the existing political system, the partisan primary system that exists today. So I think your discipline to your message has been a huge help to what you've been doing with the Forward Party. And by the way, I'm happy to be a member. I am a member. So,
well, I'm so glad. And one of the also magical elements, Paul, and you're an independent, but you can join the Forward Party and remain a registered Democrat or Republican. It's actually, in some states, the only way you can vote. So the 10% is all the easier to achieve because we don't require you to switch parties or registration. Now, I did it because, I'm the co-chair of this thing. I didn't want anyone to feel like, like it wasn't real and willing to stake its own identity. But super grateful that someone like you would be supportive, Paul, because you've done so much for so many people. So that makes me incredibly happy and proud.
Oh, thank you, Andrew. All right, so let's go to the next question. What are you seeing around the country? How many states have you actively been engaged with that maybe there's real hope that we have a reform with?
Well, so the Forward Party launched, and then we joined forces with a couple of other organizations. And there have been grassroots efforts around the country. And there have been 12 states in particular that have formed executive committees and have really, really strong leadership and operations. So we're investing more heavily in those 12 states. I'm happy to say that new states join the 12 all the time. We have chapters in 48 of the 50 states. So they're trying to get organized and write bylaws and get their leadership together. But the fun thing is the 12 states are they're blue, they're purple, they're red, they're everywhere in between. And they're really, really important to the future of the country. Arizona's on there. So, if you want to see what states are there, you can go to forwardparty.com. And if you don't see your state there, then you can just get in touch with the local leaders and say, hey, guys, what do we need to do to join what we call, the focus states? But it's 12 and growing. And if you look at the number of Forward Party members, it's in the tens of thousands and growing. The aggregate following on the email list is in the hundreds of thousands or more.
All right. So help people who maybe aren't in Arizona, that are not in one of those 12 states. To many people, it seems so daunting to get involved in something that is a reform effort where you're actually going to change the way that the system works, where you're going to change the way that the primary works. What's the starting point for someone who wants to try to make a change?
Well, one of the fun things is that you can operate locally just about anywhere, but you can also help out someplace else that might have a ballot initiative. So it's one reason why I love the Forward Party so much, is that you can join the local Forward Party and they can tell you what's going on in your community. Certainly local races are the first place to get more deeply involved. And Paul can speak to that as a former mayor of Phoenix. But one of the dirty secrets in our democracy right now is that up to 70% of local races are uncontested or uncompetitive. And if you have a number of committed people get together to boost a local candidate, it can make an enormous difference because they're not getting a lot of love or attention.
And so the Forward Party, to me, what it's doing is it's helping provide infrastructure in those states. We had the grassroots organization that was in Arizona that was working on this effort. And what was amazing to me was to see how you had connected them to other states, to other groups that had efforts going on. You helped bring communication, because all of this is about organizing. And it's amazing how two people can start organizing, and in a couple of months it's 10 people, and in a couple of months after that it becomes a couple of hundred people. If you get really 100 people really committed to working hard towards reform, it's amazing the reforms that you can get done. But again, oftentimes people don't even know how to start. And to me, the place to start, if you're one of those 12 states, go on that website. Take a look at what the Forward Party can do for you to try to help you begin to organize.
This stuff is a real confusing mess to most people, and we want to simplify it. You know what I mean? You go to Forward Party, and then we can actually save you the bandwidth. When I was in Texas this past week, I said, look, if you want to be helpful, hopefully the Forward Party can just hit you up when there's something going on, and you go bing, bang, boom. It could be sending $10 to someone in a race that's not local to you. It could be local to you. But if we get enough people together, we can make an enormous difference in so many of these races. Between recruits, and we have a mayor in Florida just switched parties. We have a bunch of awesome state legislators in Arizona that became Forward Democrats. So between recruits and new candidates, we think we can get up to hundreds of local officials. And if you're based in a part of the country, by the way, this is most of the country, unfortunately, where it's uncompetitive, because 75% of the country is in a one-party zone where one party runs everything. And you show up and you're like, hey, they pretty much fixed everything, so I can't do much. Then you can see what's going on in other parts of the country and say, ooh, I really like this person. Maybe I can help them out. So that is what the Forward Party is building. You're totally right, policy infrastructure. And you're also right that 100 people can make an enormous difference. But imagine when that 100 is 1,000.
Mm-hmm.
Like 1,000 people in a state like Arizona would be enormous.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have 1,000 people in another 20 states. This is a grassroots political movement to try and fix our democracy. And if you think about it, what else is going to fix our democracy? It's a little bit like that Margaret Mead saying, never doubt what like a few committed, dedicated individuals can do, because those are the only people who've ever done anything.
Yeah.
And I thought, yeah, that's about right. So we're growing all the time, and it's really uplifting and invigorating to meet the folks who are making it happen on the ground.
So I'm going to give you what I think is our biggest threat to democracy. I'd love to hear yours. You made mention of it a moment ago. Today we have the system. I've been involved in a couple of presidential campaigns helping people out, spent a lot of time with pollsters around the country, certainly a lot of pollsters here in Arizona. And I remember a pollster once telling me that, look, our job to be able to win this race is to terrify the other side, to terrify our base about the other side, about the other party. And if we terrify them enough, that amygdala kicks in, the amygdala hijack. All of a sudden they can't rationalize, they can't think, and it keeps them from even thinking about voting for the other person. And then all we have to do is convince the people who are in the middle that the other side is worse than us. That's our job, right? Well, it's not hard to see that political candidates spend an incredible amount of time not only bashing the other side, but they're really kind of bashing America. They're bashing what's wrong with the existing system. I love the line that was given by Fox News. They said that CNN hates America. And I think they're half right. I think CNN hates half of America and Fox News hates the other half, right? They've picked sides, and they've decided in that fight that they're going to pick who are the good guys and who are the bad guys. As you said, you add the social marketing on top, it's gas to the fire. It's more negative information. And the public, who's not necessarily engaged, is being so bombarded with the problem that many of them are losing hope. And it doesn't relate to who we really are. We miss all the great things that are happening in this country, across this country, in many different ways, in our economy, in our military, in our social programs, our ability to move human progress forward. We're missing it because we're being beaten down by these negative messages. The biggest danger to this system is that it is completely destroying the faith that our people have, the belief that we have in who it is that we are. That's my biggest problem with the existing system.
You mean this $8 billion being told to hate and fear your fellow Americans is not the answer, Paul? You mean it's not going to lead us to solve our problems? I'm right there with you, and it's why I started the Forward Party. I mean, this polarization is getting so nasty. It's tearing families apart. It's tearing friendships apart. It's tearing communities apart. And what's next, really? Right there with this disunity that the system foments, and the hate and the fear and the tribalism. What frustrates the heck out of me is that policy doesn't matter in this environment. You know, like your life getting worse, your way of life diminishing, quality of life, affordability doesn't matter to me. Like there's a fantasy that it matters to me. It does not matter. As long as I can keep the 10 to 12% most rabid tribalists happy, I win. 94% reelect rate. Can't touch me. I've drawn the district. I've looked at the numbers. I am untouchable. And so in that context, people are getting angry and frustrated on both sides for various reasons. And the problems just get worse. The fester, you know, and I'm a numbers guy. And, you know, when you look at what's happening in the country, and we're like 28th and falling in any number of basic measurements, whether it's life expectancy of kids or adults, public education, access to clean drinking water, like you name it. Like we're just not very good. And then because we have a political system that keeps people in power regardless of whether they solve the problem or not. Here's my dream. And this betrays who I am, but it's okay. I just want a giant dashboard on the walls of Congress with various measurements. And then members of Congress come in and say, okay, my job is to improve this thing. You know, my job is to make you live longer, be healthier, have better lives. Because right now our lives are irrelevant to the folks in power. All they want to do, to your point, Paul, is score some points, make us hate the other team a little bit more.
I think it's important to also point out, I believe you have a Republican co-chairman. I think it's important to point out that the Forward Party is definitely drawing in people from both sides. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, we jokingly call it the Noah's Ark, but my co-chair is Christy Todd Whitman, who is governor of New Jersey twice, is essentially a moderate Republican. She was also the EPA administrator under George W. Bush. So she's something of a green. She's always talking about not wasting energy when we're together and recycling.
Mm-hmm.
So we make a fun team, me and the governor. But there are other figures who are joining. Chris Novoselic, the co-founder of the rock band Nirvana, just joined. And he's essentially a non-partisan independent type. So we're getting people from all over the map. We're just having a lieutenant governor of a blue state who was a Republican is joining the national board. So it's a lot of fun making common cause with just good humans. And believe it or not, good humans can have different letters next to their name.
Mm-hmm.
You know, in an ideal world, we don't care as much about the letter next to your name. One of the things that's going to give me joy is when people show up with an F next to their name and people will be like, I have no idea what that is. That'll entertain me.
All right. So tell me, let's make this maybe our last question. Tell me, if somebody wants to get involved at a basic level, what do they do? But then give me this answer to this question. Let's say they really want to get involved. They really want to be active. How does someone actually do that in the Forward Party?
Oh, gosh, it's exactly what you'd think. It's you go to forwardparty.com, you click on your state, you sign up, and then you buy a T-shirt. You become a monthly supporter of like $5-10 a month. And then you meet your local leaders, and then you start spreading the word to your friends and neighbors. And anytime politics comes up and someone expresses their disgust or exasperation, you say, "Hey, have you checked out Forward Party? It's probably exactly what you want." And then we grow the movement. So if that sounds appealing to you all, please take me up on it, and then I'll see you on the trail in no time. But this is the optimistic, positive, independent political movement that Americans have been waiting for. Again, so honored, Paul, that that you're a forwardist. That makes me super happy.
Yeah, here's what I try to say to young people. If they join the Democratic Party or the Republican Party, there's a very old establishment in there that's been kind of hanging on to power for a very long time, even in the party. And the party itself wants to perpetuate its own life. But if you really want to make a difference, if you really believe that we ought to find a way to pull people together as opposed to splitting them apart, this is an ideal time to get involved with the Forward Party. It is a group there are a lot of young people there, people who are active, who are engaged, who really want to make a difference. And if they decide to step up, they will move up quickly to be able to become a part of something bigger, to be able to make a difference in a grander way.
Wow, that's a great pitch. I totally agree. And I will say, I'm sure you're hitting a very open-minded audience, because something like 2/3 of young people don't think either of the two major parties have it going on. So they should check out Forward Party, because we're just getting our feet under us, and we would love your leadership and help. I'm going to be honest with you. We could use some more young people making us cooler and hipper, because the folks who are around really want that very, very badly.
I might be able to help you get some young people, but I'm no longer a young person. So
dude, I was kind of the youngish candidate in the presidential field, and I definitely feel myself to be, the wrong demo. we're talking about.
That's my favorite.
I mean, I'm the right demo for the country, but certainly and grateful for all the young people who supported my campaign. It's probably because I hang out on social media a lot.
Yeah, I'm most appreciative to Donald Trump and Joe Biden, because they made 63, which is how old I am, a spring chicken again. So I'm happy with at least that part. Well, Andrew, thank you so much. I appreciate all the work that you're putting in. I appreciate the time and effort that you've put into Arizona. You've been just a huge help to us in getting our movement going forward. And again, thanks for all you're doing. Let's keep this Forward Party moving forward.
Amen, Paul. Thank you. I will see you in Arizona in no time, and really grateful to you, man. I mean, again, having a former mayor who's done so much, the fact that you're still working towards solutions, it means a lot. You opened this asking me about, hey, why didn't I just dem it up and hang out? I mean, the same is true of you. I mean, shoot, like there are all sorts of former elected officials not doing what you're doing.
Thanks, Andrew. You have a great day.
You too, my friend.
As you can see, Andrew Yang has just done a tremendous job around the country of promoting the Forward Party. Now, here's what you can do. If you would, press that subscribe button. Also, leave a comment. Give us your input. Even if you disagree with what we're saying, having input and understanding the job that we're doing and whether or not we're providing you with the product that we think that you want, it's important for us to know. Thank you for being a part of this program here today. Thank you for being a part of the Optimistic American. Keep up the hope. Thanks for joining the Optimistic American Show. Now, help us grow by subscribing to our channel. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a like and a comment. There is so much more that we have planned. We can't wait for you to embark upon this journey with us.